Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Odin's Movie Blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well. And today, I'm going to be doing a little bit of box office news. It's been a very long time since I've done some box office news on this channel because obviously I've been doing the box office breakdowns every single week over on the Easy Gamers channel. And so I figured I'd talk a little bit about some box office forecasting and also what the forecasting probably means for how much a film is going to make. And it's a film coming out this week, and that, of course, is Joker. Now, we've talked at length about all the nonsense going on behind the scenes with the media trying to spin the narrative of what this film is about, trying to essentially tear the film down before it's even come out and given people a chance to see it for themselves and to make their own opinions. They're honestly trying to, and obviously trying to control the narrative because that's just what the media and overall movie critics in today's world tend to do. But it is not stopping, or at least not seemingly stopping, this film from being a financial success. And so that is indeed the news today. This is coming from our boys over at Bounding Into Comics here, giving the exclusive that Warner Brothers box office expectation for Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix Joker is actually looking pretty good. So, Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix Joker film has been making waves leading up to its release this upcoming weekend. I'm now hearing from my source that Warner Brothers box office expectations for the Todd Phillips directed film are. My source tells me Warner Brothers is expecting the film to have a $90 million domestic opening weekend. They go on to tell me the film is expecting to gross $250 million during its run at the box office, and that would, of course, be a domestic turn. Now, this is coming from John F. Trent's source over at Bounding Into Comics. I've had no reason to question the sources or question the motives of Bounding Into Comics because they seem to be some pretty stand-up people. They always are very clear with what their articles are about. They're always clear whether they're talking about is rumor, reports, or whatever have you. So this is coming from him, and also he's able to back it up with some other reports from other quote-unquote more reputable sites like Box Office Pro. It says right there that back in August, Box Office Pro predicted the Joker would have a domestic opening weekend between $60 and $90 million. They temper their predictions, noting they're comparing it more to an R-rated crime thriller rather than a comic book blockbuster film akin to Marvel Studios. And I think that's actually pretty fair. And if the expectations from Warner Brothers are to be believed that they're expecting around $90 million for its opening weekend, then it seems that even Warner Brothers themselves are assuming that that's the type of money that they are going to make. So what does this mean, though, when it comes to the overall amount of money that it's going to make? Well, there's really a couple of different ways in which that can go. The first of which would be a lower run, right? So let's look at It Chapter 2. So It Chapter 2, so far, it's still making money, has made roughly $200 million domestically. So again, the overall expectation for Joker, according to Warner Brothers and the sources that John F. Trent was able to pick up, is that they think that domestically it'll hit around $250 million, which obviously means it could be less than that. It could be more than that. It could be between 200. I would say between $200 and $300 million domestically seems to be fair. Obviously, it could make much worse or do much worse than that, but the reason why I think that this number seems to be a lot more accurate is not just because there's a lot of positive buzz around the film, not just because people want to see a film about the Joker, not just because it is a comic book story and it's using a very popular comic book villain of all things, but also because of that controversy that's been surrounding the film. I think now more than ever before, you have a lot of people, I've seen it in the comment section of my videos alone, who said, I had no interest, no desire to see this yet, and now because of all this controversy, I want to see it. And now there are people that are buying tickets already for opening night because of it. So in all honesty, I think that, they might be able to. The media might still have some control over the lives of others, which is really sad. And they might be able to dissuade some people from going to see it opening night. But I think they're honestly also pushing a lot more people to go see it than they think. When you tell people, don't watch this, or this is bad, or this is going to, turn out to be, evil and lead to violence, etc. If you go ahead and make those types of claims, more often than not, as someone that teaches high schoolers, I know this. If you tell someone don't do something, they are much more likely to do it. And that not just goes for teenagers, but also adults too. It's very hard to tell an adult who's set in their ways or who has a certain belief, don't do this, without it having almost the opposite reaction. Of course, unless it was something that was really important. And if it was like a doctor's telling me something about a certain chemical or a certain, dish, obviously I'll listen to it then. But if it's the media and the critics telling me, oh, this movie's dangerous and this movie's evil and this movie's going to cause violence, that's me thinking to myself, okay, these people are idiots. These people are honestly still pushing the same tired narrative that's never proven to be true. That makes me want to see this film more because it tells me they want to put an agenda on this film because they, for some reason, don't want us to go see it ourselves. There must be a reason. And when you have the director coming out trying to call out and essentially calling out the far left and SJWs in general and saying that, hey, man, they're proving themselves to really not be that much different than the people they claim to despise, I think, in all honesty, that makes me want to actually see the vision on screen. It makes me want to see the character study. The fact that he said before that he was not interested in making nearly a comic book adaptation, a fair or a comic realistic adaptation, but rather a more realistic approach, very similar to what a Christopher Nolan did with Batman, or very similar to what other directors have done in the past as well with certain characters. And I think that this, to me, like Logan, for example, this to me seems to be much more of that type of situation, right? Just a month later, box office would significantly increase their projections. Earlier this month, they predicted an opening weekend between 85 and 105 million, with a domestic total of around 210. In fact, they noted their opening weekend estimates increased 27% from their previous week. And the fact that that's over a month, that's a month later at that point, and the fact that that's probably that is the most recent number we've gotten, seems to indicate that $90 million opening weekend with $250 million domestic total seems to make a lot of sense. And as I said before, the one movie that you compare it to would be It Chapter 2. So let's say that it does pretty well domestically, but maybe it isn't crazy overseas. And that's what you see going on currently with It Chapter 2, where it's making decent money. It's going to probably, cap out around 200 million plus here in the United States, but foreign overseas market really isn't going all that crazy for it. However, when you look at the overall series and you compare it to a film like It Chapter 1, this film ended up making $327 million domestically and then made an additional $372 million overseas, which means that you could have a situation where the film is going to be very successful both domestically and foreign market, which means to me that the end number of the film overall, not just domestically, which they think is going to be $250 million, I think could be around $500 million. And I get that because I look at the $700 million cap, because that's assuming that, again, this film, It Chapter 1, made about over $70 million more than what Warner Brothers projects the film is going to make in the United States. And so that, to me, would be a pretty fair cap to put on it, especially since when it comes to superhero films, when it comes to films like The Joker, especially with the amount of press it's getting, we can assume that the foreign market's going to at least show up for it. Again, domestically is a big question mark, but the foreign market, I would say, has a pretty good chance of showing up for it. So having a $700 million cap seems to be the most sense. And then when you look at It Chapter 2, which has less money coming domestically and foreign market, I would say that the floor for it seems to be around $450 million, right? That's probably what this film is going to end up making by the end of its run, which why I think based on these initial numbers, if I had to predict, if I was a betting man, I would say that it probably will get close to the 90 million for its opening weekend. Of course, we'll have to wait for it to happen. It's definitely going to do well. How well it does is going to be a giant question mark. Are theaters going to start to kowtow to these stupid critics and their agendas and shut screenings down and shut theaters down, etc.? I really hope not, because when you do that, when you go ahead and give into fear, you give the people that start that fear more power, and it just emboldens them to actually act out, to bring about your fears to reality, because that is what happens in a broken mind. So that is something that could definitely happen, and therefore, if it's that successful, $250 million domestically seems at least logical. But if it can be even more than that, it can be even more of a hit, if it can get to $300 million here, which I think is a little bit of a stretch at this point in time, since it is indeed a rated R film, and it is able to do well to, in the foreign market too, you're looking at a film that is likely going to rest somewhere between $500 and $700 million. Now, some people said, hey, couldn't this be a film that makes $1 billion? I don't see that for a couple of reasons. One, because of the fact that it is a rated R film, and that alone is going to keep certain films back. I would think that another good example of a film, though it's very different in its overall style, which is why I think this one ended up doing a little bit better, would be like Deadpool, right? Deadpool made $783 million on a $58 million budget, with really not that much of a budget when you think about the superhero films, but it made a crap ton of money. Compare that to Deadpool 2, made $785 million on a $110 million budget, so it was able to pretty much match what it had made the first time, making $325 and $460 million domestically and also foreign market respectively. But when you look at the two films, you're looking at two rated R films, right? But this one's definitely more of a comedy. This is a character that a lot of people are drawn to. So it's really going to be tough to make a final prediction on this because of the fact that you're dealing with a drama versus a comedy in the cases of Joker versus Deadpool 2. And also, though, there is a correlation because they are both rated R, which means the people seeing the film, the audience that this film is geared towards, is different too. Not to mention, it's an action film versus more of a dramatic portrayal. That all being said, I think that the one takeaway we can have from all of these things and all these predictions and all of these different projections is that the film is going to be a success. And that to me is worth talking about alone, because The media has tried to sink this film before it's come out. The media has tried to control the narrative. The media wants this film to fail because for some reason, either out of agenda or out of other nefarious reasons, they honestly are trying to push forward this narrative that this is going to somehow cause violence, which we know is nonsense and just does not work. However, it does not look like people are listening to them, and hopefully, if indeed what I think is going to happen happens, many people will go to the movie in spite of that media and in spite of that attempt to control what movies we watch, what we should watch, and what type of movies can be made in our modern day culture. But anyway, let me get your thoughts about this. What do you think it's going to make at the box office? Do you think that 90 million opening domestically, $250 million total foreign, or rather domestic total, is sensible? And if not, what would your alternative be? And also, how much do you think this movie is going to make overseas? Because I think that's also a giant question mark. As I said before, I think overall domestic and foreign market total together probably a range between $500 and $700 million, which, to be honest, for a rated R drama, that to me would be a huge statement, especially when the film was not expected to make nearly as much about a month or so ago. Those numbers are always going to tighten up and change just a little bit, though, because obviously now we've got more information as far as pre-sales are concerned, and sometimes that tells us a lot. Sometimes, like in the case of Solo Star Wars story, it ended up being completely wrong about how much money that ended up making. And I think this one, though, is going to definitely be more than what that film made in The Last Jedi. Or at least, I hope it will. Anyway, let me know your thoughts about that and all the things we talked about in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash the like button, give us a subscribe. It helps us a lot. You're all amazing, beautiful people. Have a wonderful day. And as always, God bless.